Here we are back in our Pro Tools timeline. We have Auto-Tune instantiated. We used AutoKey to determine that the key of this particular song was set to C, and it opted to use a major scale. Now, another thing that I want to look at is we need to choose the appropriate input type. So we have these different options over here. We have soprano, we have alto, tenor. These are all pretty self-explanatory. We have low male over here. We also have instrument, and then we have bass. So essentially, you want to be choosing the proper input type for the signal that you're passing through. In this particular case, if we take a listen to this vocal, let's go ahead and come back to the beginning here.
I've been blood, black and blue. I've been blood.
Let's disable this preference over here. Bring that back to everything that's default.
I'm still woken.
I could determine that most likely this could either be a low male or an alto tenor. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose low male in this particular circumstance. And one thing to note is that the input type that you choose will actually have an effect on how Auto-Tune Pro is detecting the pitch. So there's specific ranges of parameters that work for these different types. So you want to make sure that you're choosing the appropriate type. Now in this particular case, truthfully, I could probably either choose alto tenor or low male. I'm going to go ahead and leave this in low male setting. The number one parameter that we have to adjust when thinking about Auto-Tune is the retune speed. So this one parameter in itself can have a drastic effect on the way that Auto-Tune is processing the vocals. Now, one thing that I want to point out right off the bat is that if I'm doing pitch correction, my number one rule for myself, because I've made this mistake in the past, is to always be listening to pitch in reference to something else, meaning that my pitch for this particular lead vocal is relative to everything else that's happening in this song. So if I take a look at this song, we go back to the very beginning.
I've been blood, black and blue.
So we've got some keys, some synth pianos. These are all printed. Some effects. If I move over here. And then if I move a little bit further on down the line, let's take a look at this section.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady, gonna give it my all.
So for me to be listening to this pitch isolated in solo is not the best idea.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready.
So something may sound like it's off, but if we listen to it relative to the music that's in the background, it might sound okay. So that's one thing to note right off the bat. So if we take a look at this, we have sent over our scale and our key. We've set our input type to low male. Let's now take a look at adjusting this retune speed, and we'll talk about these parameters as well. Now, I'm going to go ahead and press play and watch what happens. We can keep our eye on this indicator. Now, this is indicating what type of pitch correction is happening. In drastic situations,
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready.
We can see that there's lots of correction happening from left to right. And if I brought it down all the way,
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on.
So this is the great thing about Auto-Tune, is that based on this one parameter alone, we can get a really transparent sounding result just by adjusting this. So I'm going to go ahead and option click it, and let's see where Auto-Tune has defaulted to in the auto state.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady, gonna give it my all and never regret it, good, bad, right, or wrong.
Now I got to be honest with you, that doesn't sound bad, still pretty transparent. If we listen to it in context of the track, let's go ahead and let's try to pull this down somewhere at about 50 and see what happens.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady, gonna give it my all and never regret it, good, bad, right.
Okay, so that sounds pretty good. Let's go ahead and bypass that.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady, gonna give it my all and never regret it, good, bad.
Okay, so it's definitely helping with that vocal. Now, one thing I want to talk about as well is, in addition to the retune, which is the most important parameter when you're using Auto-Tune in general, we also have these other two parameters. So we have humanize and we have flex tune. So if we hover our cursor, we have these tips. So first of all, humanize. Add realism to sustain notes at high retune speeds. Let's go ahead and play from that same section, and I want to have a look at adjusting this parameter. Now, full disclosure on this, if I had my retune speed all the way down, where we're basically not getting that much pitch correction happening at all,
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady.
that I'm not going to really notice a difference even if I crank these up.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready.
In fact, you'll see that pretty much nothing is happening. That's because you can think of these parameters, flex tune and humanize, as kind of a relative offset. What do I mean by that? Okay, well, what I mean is that I can use quite an aggressive pitch correction setting. So let's use a retune speed of 20.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady. Gonna give it my all and never regret it. Good, bad, right, or
Now watch what happens as I bring up humanize. Now keep in mind, let's keep this description in mind. Add realism to sustained notes at high retune speeds. So let's listen to the sustained notes and let's start dialing this parameter up.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady. Gonna give it my all and never regret it. Good, bad, right, or wrong.
Let's actually listen to this in isolation, even though this is technically not what I would recommend doing. Let's go ahead.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady. Gonna give it my all and never regret it.
Okay, that same passage with humanize off.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady. Gonna give it my all and never regret it.
It's very subtle, but you can hear what's happening with the auto tune, and you can also see visually with just this indicator in terms of what's happening with those notes. Now let's take a look at flex tune. So if we hover our cursor over flex tune, increase flex tune to allow more pitch deviation, usually for expressive purposes. So here's the basics of this. We can actually get away with using rather aggressive retune speeds. So in this particular case, even though this is where auto-tune defaults to at the 20 retune speed, in my opinion, this is way too aggressive, and I would rather have it default to something like 40 or 50, but we can actually get away with quite aggressive retune speeds if we use the humanize and flex tune. So in fact, let's go for broke. Let's go all the way up.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready.
So we can hear that massive T-Pain share type effect. Let's start dialing up the flex tune.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady. Gonna give it my all and never regret it. Good, bad, right, or wrong.
Notice how we can get away with an extremely aggressive retune speed, but by adjusting flex tune and also the humanize function,
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady. Gonna give it my all and never regret it. Good, bad, right, or wrong.
let's actually back off our retune a little bit, but we're still being super aggressive.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady. Gonna give it my all and never regret it. Good, bad, right, or wrong.
So let's listen to that in the context of the track.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady. Gonna give it my all and never regret it. Good, bad, right, or wrong.
Very interesting, right? So that's something that we can do. If you want to get away with those aggressive retune speeds, we can use both the flex tune and the humanize to dial back in some naturalism into our performance. Now, that being said, for this type of performance, I would definitely be dialing in something a lot less aggressive for this particular performance. So let's go ahead. I'm going to bring flex tune and humanize down.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready.
Let's just start dialing it
Hold
up.
on, keep steady. Gonna give it my all and never regret it. Good, bad, right, or wrong.
Okay, so that sounds pretty good to me, somewhere around 60. But I'm also noticing that I'm hearing a little bit of things happening on the end of the sustain. I'm hearing that waver.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady. Gonna give it my all.
Okay, so let's dial up the humanize a little bit.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady. Gonna give it my all and never regret it. Good, bad, right, or wrong.
You can also bring up flex time.
Life is a song. It will go on.
Okay, so I think we're at a pretty good spot there in terms of just dialing in some really quick automatic settings. Now, keep in mind, we were able to do this by simply popping this into the proper mode in terms of the scale, dialing the retune speed up, and tweaking two parameters. Now, lastly, I want to have a look at the natural vibrato. Let's go ahead with these same settings. And in fact, you know what? I'll even boost this up a little bit more just for sake of demonstration. And let's start pushing the natural vibrato, and I want to do this in isolation.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady, gonna give it my all. And
You hear what's happening there? We are essentially exaggerating that vibrato pitch curve.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady, gonna give it my all. And never regret it, good, bad, right, or wrong.
So this is zero processing happening with natural vibrato at zero. If you have a singer, and this is inherent to some particular singers, that they almost sing very flat by default and they don't have that much vibrato. If you wanted to accentuate that vibrato, we could simply dial this up.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady, gonna give it my all. And
So this is a matter of tweaking all of these parameters against each other to taste for the performance. So I want to take a quick moment to talk about one more thing when we're working in automatic mode. So in this particular case, we're looking at a straight case where we're using a C major scale and everything is working. In other performances, you may find yourself in a situation where you have passing tones or accidentals. And that is that for a brief moment in time, that maybe one note is sung that's actually outside of the scale. And that could be where maybe the song modulates into a different key just for one section and then it comes back down and it's meant to add dissonance or some type of emotion to the track. In that case, you may find that using a straight C major scale, for example, would not work because essentially it will only let the singer sing in tune according to the notes within this scale. Now, when you find yourself in that situation, we have another opportunity to do something slightly different. So for example, if I bring this back to chromatic, you'll notice that our keyboard is now available. So let's go ahead and open up our advanced view. And in this particular case, we can actually tweak some of these parameters over here to help combat that situation. Now, for example, let's say that we know we're using a low male as the input type. Our key is going to be within the key of C. I could, for example, do something like, right now it's set to chromatic, but our key is set to C. So maybe I want to set this to major. You'll notice that we have the option to remove all these notes. So it's removed all of the notes that technically are not in the key, but yet we're still in chromatic mode. Now, there's a difference here between remove and bypass. So I can bypass all, or I can remove all. Let's go ahead and let's set it to major, like we said. And now, if I wanted to remove certain keys over here, that means that they are completely removed from the scale and they can't be sung. But the thing to keep in mind is that sometimes you may have a passing tone where a vocalist is going to swoop from one note into another. Maybe they're coming down or taking up. So in the case where you've removed that note altogether, it might sound awkward because auto-tune would then automatically segue between one note to the other. So in that case, we have different options in terms of bypass versus remove. So maybe you don't want to remove something entirely, but maybe bypass would be the better option in that circumstance. So for example, just to kind of show this right now, I've set this to be major. So I'm using the key of C and I've set this to be major. Let's go ahead and start removing some of these notes just so you can hear how this would sound.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady, gonna give it my all.
So you can see what's happening here when I remove those. So now let's go ahead and set these back. Now let's use the bypass function instead. So we'll bypass some of these.
I've got to be strong now, I'm ready. Hold on, keep steady, gonna give it my all. And never regret it, good, bad, right, or wrong.
So you can see how, let's go ahead and set this back to major, the difference between remove and bypass. So you want to make sure that you pay attention to which mode you're working on, because like I said, in some cases, you might not necessarily want to remove something from the scale. You might just want to bypass it, because we always have to think of those transitions between notes and how awkward things may sound if you choose the wrong mode. So that is the advanced view, and to be honest with you, that's about as far as I'm going to cover in this particular series, but it's definitely worth exploring if you find yourself in the situation where you're in the key of a song, but you're modulating and you have those passing tones or those accidentals that you need to deal with. In that particular case, setting your scale mode to chromatic, setting the key appropriately to C, and then opening the advanced view and then using either bypass or remove to deal with those accidentals or those passing tones is the way to go. So like I said, this is dealing with automatic mode, and in my opinion, Auto-Tune does an amazing job as being a real-time pitch correction tool that you can apply to a track, and it can process things in real time using an automatic detection. And as we know from the examples looked at in this video, we can make our pitch correction extremely aggressive with that classic Auto-Tune tone. And conversely, we can also dial in something that's extremely natural and really light-handed that just kind of feathers the pitch and doesn't go overboard with pitch correction. In the next video, I actually want to take a look at the graphical mode and explore using that to do manual editing in Auto-Tune. So we'll catch you for more in the next video.